Okay.
Giving a big hand.
Thank you. Okay, great to see you. It's great to be here. It's great to be back in Malmö. I used to live here for 5 years, but now I live up in Stockholm. My name is Erik. I work currently as a head of development for a consulting firm up in Stockholm called iTeam. But what I'm going to talk about now has nothing to do with my job, apart from technology. We're going to talk about this Öppna Skolplattformen, the whole history behind that. And I'm going to focus on the technical aspects. I'm going to, of course, go through the history of all of this, because it's interesting, both from historical perspective, but also from technical perspective. So the title of this is How We Built a Successful App for Hostile API Provider. So another title for this talk was this, How I Became a Parent Without Having Any Children. I'm going to go back to that later, but it sounds more creepy, so that's not a title for this talk. Okay. So in the year 1628, we got the proof of that Stockholm is really bad at big projects. So a couple of years before that, the king had ordered the navy to build the best and baddest ship of them all to conquer the seas. They built it, they launched it, it sank right away. Fortunately, we managed to bring it back up and make a museum out of it, so it wasn't a complete waste. And yeah, I mean, it was complete total failure of public funding. It cost a massive amount of the current GDP for Sweden at that time. So yeah, it was pretty bad economically, pretty bad for all the people who unfortunately died from this as well. But it was also a proof that public funded projects tend to fail, especially when they're very big. So yeah, you would think they would learn, right? So about 400 years later, there were probably more projects during this period. I'm not going to go through them all. That's a different talk. Stockholm launched their school platform, their custom-built system for parents, teachers, and the students. It was going to be revolutionary. It was going to be the best. It's going to be a huge success. And the first thing that happens is they have a massive data breach because they didn't protect their APIs. You could basically fish any personal information out of the system. But that wasn't all. This is how it's supposed to look like when you logged into it. But this is usually the picture you get. Technical error. That's a common error. Everybody who uses Stockholm School Platform knows they get a technical error. Okay. That could be the case if I had any children. Maybe I got some children that I don't know of that are called technical fail, but you never know. But since this happened to other people, and I'm very sure most of them don't name their kid technical fail, we're pretty sure that this is not the thing. And this was very random. Sometimes, for some people, it always happened. For some people, it happened occasionally. For some people, it happened if they used the system in a certain way. If they have multiple children and went in and checked one child and then went back and checked another child, they got a technical error. People were upset. The app didn't work. The parents were frustrated because they couldn't get the information from the school that they needed. The school was frustrated, especially the teachers, because they couldn't send information to the parents. Students didn't care, you know. The students, the kids. They showed up when they had to. That was it. But yeah, the thing was that the Stockholm, this project, it was started like 2013 or something. It was announced. Of 2015, it started properly, and up until 2020, it cost 1 billion Swedish crowns, or 170 million US dollars. That's a big sum of money. So you know, let's put it in relation to something. India launched a satellite that they sent to Mars. It costed less. Now, this might not be a fair comparison. I mean, a satellite to Mars does different things than a school system. Which one is more complicated? I'll leave it to you. Okay. Technical error. So people were frustrated, people were angry, people were complaining a lot, but there was no alternative. There was no way for anyone else to really fix this, or as so we thought. And how bad was it? Now, I don't know how many of you have worked with app development, but you probably used apps. You've probably seen reviews for apps. You probably reviewed an app yourself. And as you know, if you review an app, you can choose between 1 star or 5 stars. You can't give less than 1 star. So for an app to have an average rating, since this was launched, for 1.1, I have never seen that. I worked with app development for more than 10 years. This is the only example I have of this. And it's consistent between Android and iOS. So it doesn't matter which platform you use. Another thing here is that on App Store on iOS, you can actually reset the whole rating thing and start from scratch. But yeah. Okay, so rating is one thing, but what about the reviews? What do people write? And I've seen a couple of app reviews that are very harsh. I've seen a couple of app reviews that are very creative. I've never seen anything like this. So the first one here up here is my favorite. It's a Nobel Award for the literature almost. It's like the creativity of writing this one is amazing. And then people like, I regret I even got kids. Technical error. Well, here you go. See, technical error. Yeah. So, it's and there are lots of these. This is just a few of them I picked. You can go in and check this yourself. It's a wonderful reading, if you didn't have to use the app. Yeah. So overall, this probably was the worst app ever created in the history of App Store and Play Store. And I say that as an expert in actually developing and maintaining and releasing applications on Google Play and App Store. I have never seen anything like this. Okay, but maybe they fixed it. So they started in 2019. That's how far back you can see the release history for iOS. And it's bug fixes, bug fixes, bug fixes, bug fixes, bug fixes. They changed the address. And the thing is, like this one, 1.6 here, they changed the address. They mean they changed the address of the ones who own the app, basically. It's not just like text in the App Store. They updated the app description, which required a new version of the app, apparently. So they actually added something. They added support for Freya ID, which is like alternative to bank ID. And then they switched to not saying bug fixes, but felrättningar, which is bug fixes. So I guess someone else was writing that one. So yeah, they basically haven't changed anything since the first release. In that, maybe they've introduced features, but at least they haven't announced it. Okay. So late 2020, Christian Landgren, he is he's a CEO of iTeam that I work for, but he's also a parent in Stockholm. He has 3 kids in school, and he was like, "Screw this! I'm going to do this. I'm going to write a new app, so at least we parents can do something properly." So Christian has worked more on web front end and back end. He doesn't have app development experience, so he announced in a Facebook channel, a Facebook group, that I'm gonna fix Stockholm Skolplattform. Someone want to help me? And I'm like, oh, that sounds like an interesting challenge. I don't have any kids, but it's an app. I got time to spare right now, so let's try it out. So him and me and one other guy called Johan Öbrink, we started working on this together. And we created the Öppna Skolplattformen. And this is how it looks currently, I believe. This is how it looks when you log in as a test user. So if you install it, or if you download the source code, build it yourself, you can log in as a test user. You don't need an account in Stockholm. And the way we did this was basically that we mocked the API responses. We provided fake data so everyone could test out the app. And it was immediately a huge success. The feedback we got from users who downloaded it, installed it, was immense. Like, people were like, I can finally read the schedule for my kids. I can finally read the newsletter from the teacher. I know what's happening. I have like unread information from 2 years back that they haven't been able to read. So that was fun. It's always fun when you do something that's appreciated. So February, we launched the first version. We decided to charge 12 Swedish crowns for it, or like $1, which is the minimum price you can put on App Store. And the reason for that was we wanted to also make a statement. Creating good software isn't free. Just because it's open source, it's an open source project. It's available on GitHub. Anyone can download it, build their own version, make their own modifications, etc. But we wanted to show that it actually costs money to build software, because we weren't getting paid by the Stockholm City, as you will hear. And we wanted to like make a political statement more or less about this. Not just that we fixed it on top of their broken stuff, but also that, yeah, things cost. So how well received was it? Well, we ended up in the top paid apps at App Store for a couple of weeks, which is, for someone having worked with apps for a long time, I've never even gotten close to this. I haven't gotten close to the free apps on App Store or Play Store even. So this was amazing. And how amazing was it? Well, people in Silicon Valley was actually talking about us. So I have friends at Google who like, Erik, we talked about you at lunch. I'm like, oh, nice. But something about Android that I'm usually working with? No, about your project. Oh, okay. So that was interesting. So how did we build it? Because that's interesting. And basically, the way we did this, we logged in to the Stockholm School Platform on the web. We pressed F12 on the keyboard, and you get the developer tools. You move over to the network tab first, but first we took the sources and we checked the JavaScripts they had. And from that one, we figured out what they were calling. We got the responses. We basically decoded their API, their internal API. It's not really an API. It's just endpoints delivering data in like weird ways. We also got to see that they're using very, very old versions of open source components. They're using Angular 1.5 something. If you ever used Angular, you know that you should probably not use that. That specific version has a number of open vulnerabilities, so you should actually, we reported that and said you should probably fix this. But yeah, that's the thing. It's very hard to understand what they were doing because some of the requests happened several times for no apparent reason. So it took a while for us to decode like how this worked. If we went to look at the data, for instance here, this is for me when I go and fetch the children. It says success, true, error, null, and then an empty data. So yeah, so it doesn't tell me that I don't have any children. It's really just, here is the data. And you don't have any children. So that's why the data, that the view, if you log in and you don't get a technical error, you just get an empty page. Nothing like you don't have any kids or anything like that. And this get children endpoint was the main blocking point for us, as I will come to soon. Yeah, so this was how we figured out the API. And once you did this, it's pretty easy to build, actually. So we picked React Native. And you might ask, why did we pick React Native? Why didn't we pick another cross-platform? Why didn't we go like completely native for iOS and Android? Well, the reason was that we wanted other people to be able to help out. And the developer skill that's most common is JavaScript, which made this React Native being the natural choice here. There are some downsides with using React Native. I will speak about that in the end. But overall, this worked really well for us. You could do the app in one programming language. It goes for iOS and Android. And yeah, it turned out well. The UI, so if you use React Native, just React Native, you have to build a lot of the UI components yourself, you have to style them, and it's like a lot of work. Most of us who were doing this work were not designers, not at this point in the beginning. So we picked a UI framework called UI Kitten. It's based on the EVA design system, which is very nice. It doesn't look like native Android or iOS, really, but it works really well for our purpose. So this was the second choice we did. We actually updated the UI after this, but still building on UI Kitten. So it's very flexible, and I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to do a cross-platform app and don't have the resources to invest in their own UX design. Architecturally, so we have the React Native app, and then we had two other NPM modules. These were in separate Git repositories at first. One was the API hooks, and it's basically React hooks. If you're doing React frontend, you probably heard of that, but it's basically like the API layer inside the app, which abstracts away all the network calls. The actual network calls was in this repository or NPM module called Embedded API, specifically targeting the Stockholm School. So this was what it looked like in the beginning of 2021, sorry. And it worked really well, but there were some hurdles with this. Whenever we needed to update the API, we needed to update that Git repository, release a new module on NPM, and then rebuild the app with the update, using the updated version of this library. So it was not in the same Git repository. So it took a little, it was a little bit uncomfortable working with. Now, you might ask, why didn't we put it all in the same repository? Well, we wanted it to be reusable. We wanted it to be possible for other schools, other systems to use API hooks and implement their own solution. So other schools could use this as well. So, code. How many of you write code? A couple of you. Okay. For those of you who don't write code, it's not going to be that complicated. This is just straight up React code. You do the same thing for web frontend. We have an API provider which wraps this thing, provides the hooks that we have generic ones, regardless of what school you have. And then we have the init from we initialize from the Stockholm school system, their API endpoints. And we wrap our React thing like that. And the login controller, which will be like the screen that handles when you log in, like you get the bank ID thing, looks like this. We have the use API, where we have endpoints for handling when you do login and when you do logout. And in the beginning, this was basically the code that was needed. We just needed to call their endpoint for starting bank ID session on the server, and then we launched the bank ID app, and we got login working. And this is great, because this will only work in an app. It won't work if you do it on a web page. If you do pure web, we couldn't have done this, because the web has limitations called CORS, cross-origin resource security, something. So it's only possible to do this because we're doing an app for iOS and Android. So in February 2021, when we started, we got a number of URLs that we used for their APIs. We got the login URL, we got the login status, because Bank ID works like that. You launch it on the server, then you launch the Bank ID app, and the Bank ID app talks to the Bank ID server, which talks back to the server there. So you need something to talk to your server to check the status. We have an endpoint for getting the cookie for once we are logged in. And then we have the get children, which I showed in the beginning. That gets you an array of a list of all your children that you have that's registered in the school. And then we have stuff like you get the calendar, you can get the list of your classmates, get the information about the current user, that's yourself, news from the school, details for a certain news item. This returns like all the news items. Images are sometimes embedded and need a different call. Notifications and news are almost similar, and depending on what school you were in, the school used these differently. So some used notifications to send information to parents, while some used news. Menu means the school menu, like the rest when they eat. And then the schedule for the kids. So this was the things we had from the beginning, and it worked very well. This was before they tried to block us. So once they started blocking us, the number of URLs we needed to implement are these. Much, much more. There are some new stuff added. We added like additional stuff for the restaurant menu in the school, but most of these endpoints came because they made an effort to block us for the app to work. We had to work around that. They basically added additional network calls. Okay. So the first blocking attempt, because they really didn't like this, they told us that we should stop doing this, and they tried to like convince us that it was wrong or illegal and everything like that. And we said, like, it's not illegal. We're just building on top. Live with it. We would like to cooperate. Nope. But this was how we fetched like the list of children. Regular JavaScript code. Nothing strange here really. And after the first blocking attempt, that function looks like this. So what does it do? And I will explain a little bit here. The thing is, regardless if you use the official app or our app, you're still logged in the same way. You still have the same rights to use the data from Stockholm School. So instead here, what they did, they add a call to something called CDN. We don't really know what that meant. They had another call for something called authbody. Not really sure what that meant, but those two together were very important. And then we used those two, the data we got from those two URLs, and we called a third URL where we combine the response from the first two to get a token, a key, that we then had to add to all our consecutive calls. We thought, but it turned out they only protected one of these, the list, where you get the list of your children. The rest of the system was unprotected in the same way as in the beginning. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at these more. The first call, basically we just called that URL. Nothing strange. We just added your login key that you had received from the bank ID, and we got another URL. We took that URL, we saved that one, and then we had retrieve authbody, which was another URL we called, and we took that one. It's basically returned a piece of text, random piece of text looking. It's like another key. So the response from these two calls had to be combined as parameter to the third call, where we build up a new network call. And here comes the funny thing here. When you made this call, you had to remove all the cookies and all the headers and everything that was previously stored in your session, just for this specific call. You made the call, you got a response, and then we have to take all the cookies that we had removed and put them back into the session. And then we got all the tokens that we could do to make the proper network calls, so the rest of the API. And we were like, do they really know what they're doing? Because all they did was force everyone, including themselves, because their own app had to do this as well, to make additional network calls, not for the sake of safety, but just for the sake of making things more complicated for us. But for us to solve this, it took about 4 hours of work for one person to write this. So it wasn't really blocking us. It took longer time for us to get the app released on App Store for an update than it took to write this code. Okay. The second blocking attempt, which then proved that they had no clue whatsoever how apps work, was they added something called cross-site request forgery. And this is a technique basically that you use on websites where you have a form. You want to make sure that any submissions to this form must come from our web page and not some external website. But when you use an app, that's not the case. Everything is contained in the app here. It can make whatever network calls left and right it wants. Doesn't work like a browser. So cross-site request forgery has no effect whatsoever when you're using apps. Okay, sure. We'll get that token. So we just fetched that page where that token was, extracted it from the HTML code, and added it to the headers for all the calls that we were making. Nothing more. Again, it took longer time to update the app on App Store than actually writing this code. So the common name for this token that we got in the previous attempt is X-XSRF-token. So what did they do? They renamed the token. They kept the old one, but they added another one, and now it's called Y-XSRF token 11. That's it. They did this 5 times. Just renaming this token. And at the final attempt, we were like, come on, really? So we created a config file that we uploaded to GitHub, where we had all our code, where we put the name of this token, so that we could change it without having to release a new app. And then that problem was solved. So that, the Stockholm Stad, the city of Stockholm, they could look at our source code and what we were doing. So we knew they probably would figure that one out. So they stopped actually renaming this one at that point. We were amazed. So they called the cops instead for hacking them. Now, important thing to remember here is that our app, it's published on App Store. We don't see, when you log in with that app, it doesn't see anything. We don't see anything. It's just between the user of the app, the parent, and the Stockholm City. Same as the official app. There's no data coming to us. We don't log anything. We don't even have analytics in the app. We don't even have crash reporting in the app. Just because we want to make sure that every parent should know that we do not see any information at all about your kids. So, but they decided to press charges or call the cops. And the cops were basically like, come on, we have more important things to do. The reason why it took like from April to August here is because the summer of 2021, you remember there was a big hack, Coop got hacked and everything like that. So they kind of busy. They really didn't have time with this, so they got back to it in August and they were like, thanks. Okay, that was nice. It was a little bit nervous in the beginning, but we were like, okay, whatever. Meanwhile, while all this was happening, we decided, what else can we improve in the app? So yeah, so we added translations. And this was when non-developers starting to participate, because we got translations like for all kinds of things. We have Ukrainian today. We got Latin. You can use a thing in Latin. Karin Nygård, who also made the illustration here, decided to provide Latin translations to the whole app. Why not? But we have Italian, Japanese, Polish, Portuguese, Spanish, Somali. Yeah. So that was fun. We had a dark theme, stuff like that. I did a lot of work on accessibility, and if you don't know what accessibility means, it's basically making sure the app works with screen readers for people who are, vision impaired. The official app does not have that much of that. It does not work well with screen readers. But basically, it's easier to do on Android than on iOS. But there is an app that you install. That's called the Accessibility Scanner. You install that one, you give it a permission, and what basically will do is record the screen of your phone and then report about accessibility errors. It could be that this title does not have a description that can be used by screen readers, etc., and things like that. And the funny thing is, since we did this, so we actually fulfilled the legal requirements from the public schools that they are supposed to have, but the Stockholm official app doesn't. Okay, so in September, the app stopped working, like completely. And we were like, what happened? And we logged in. Again, we press F12, we check the response we got from the server, and it looks like this. And we're like, oh, they obfuscated the code. The JavaScript code, that is. Because some parts of our app relied on like traversing the code and trying to extract information from the JavaScript they had on the site. So we did that first. We tried to de-obfuscate this one, but it turned out that we're doing something else as well. So the obfuscation part, that was easy to fix. But they generated a key on the client, like in their official app, that was sent back to the server and then validated. And if anyone knows anything about security, it means that doesn't mean anything. Because anyone who logs in can get this one, which we did. This is how the code looks like that does this. And I will explain the code. So what they have is a list of words. And at the end of the list of these words, they also add the current time, the timestamp, date and time. Then they have a list of letters. And then they have a random number. Random. And what they do then is they loop through from 0 up to this random number. And they take this list of words and they base 64 encode it. That's basically a way to transform something to a different format. You can get it back there. But they did this, in this case, 9 times. They base 64, the same data, 9 times. So the only way for us to get it back was to unencode it 9 times. But this is not an encryption. Base 64 is not encryption. It's just a way to encode data in a different format. And then they combine these pieces together. And that's another key that we had to send in one of the network calls. And we're like, okay, that's fun. Hold on. The timestamp generated on the client, how does that work? How can the server know what the time is supposed to be? Wait. When they did this change, the official app stopped working for a lot of parents, but not always. Also, the website stopped working for a lot of parents, but not always. It can't be older than a few seconds from the previous call. So basically, the server kept check of the last time you made a network call, and then when you sent this one, it decoded this and picked out the timestamp and compared them. If they were too far apart, the network call failed. Okay, what does this mean? What if the clock on your computer is wrong? Because the first timestamp the server decided. The second timestamp is decided by the browser. So this means that it started failing for people randomly. But it only checked if it was too old. It didn't check in the future. So the way we got around this and fixed it before, so our app worked much, much better. Well, it always worked much better. But our app did not have this problem, but their app had the problem for a long, long time, because we basically just added an hour on this timestamp, and then we were good. We were quite amazed at the amount of work that was put down into this. So we were like, oh my God, how could they spend time on this? Didn't someone say stop? So public system, great in Sweden, we can get the bills for everyone, well, the public sector, and see what things cost. So we did that. We got the 95,000 Swedish crowns for 80 hours work. That's okay. That's a fair price, I guess, for 80 hours work for writing all that code. Too bad it's not useful. They had some other stuff in that bill as well. I don't know what stress analysis means with quotes, especially since it costs 200,000. And they also made a new architecture. I guess we'll see that soon. Yeah, that was us. We were like, what is this? But you know, it was taxpayers' money spent, so we decided that what if we like make an official thing about this one? So we decoded the whole thing. We made a complete implementation. We call it a phantom crypto. It's an encryption that doesn't really is seen or works or is real. Here's the code. Here's the GitHub repo. It's released under open source. I do not advise anyone to use this, but you could if you want to. So yeah. That was fun. It didn't last long. They removed all that and reverted all the changes, and were like realized that, oh, shit, this doesn't work. So, and then they actually went out and said, we are going to stop trying to stop them. Yeah. Meanwhile, we realized that there were requests from other cities and other parents in other cities. They also wanted this, so we had to solve the way. I showed in the beginning where we have two modules that were in different repos, and it took a little bit of time to update everything. What if we got another city involved here? That would make it more complex. So we put all the code into one monorepo. The challenge with that one is that React Native does not support soft links, which is like a way for pointing to files in different folders. Doesn't support soft links, basically, which makes the regular monorepo structure that you use when you write stuff in JavaScript and Node doesn't work very well. But there was a solution called NX, or there is. So we decided to go with this one because they had a React Native plugin. So we're using NX as a monorepo solution for our project. It works really well. And the structure for our app is like this. You got the architecture, and we have apps. We also have our website in the same repository right now. And then we have all the libraries. And this is how the code looks right now. We have the API, that's the API hooks, the generic API for all the schools. And then we have the school platform for Stockholm. And then we have Järntorget, that's Gothenburg. We have started on via class. Curriculum is a standardized way of expressing subjects in school. Yeah, and then some additional hooks that belongs to React. So this is the architecture for our app today. It works really well, and we're happy with it. So then Wired magazine emailed us, hey, want to make a report about you? We're like, okay, sure. So this is, you know, if you're in tech, ending up in Wired magazine is something you hope happens because that will mean your startup is successful and you will get tons of money. Did not expect it to happen because of this though. But I guess that's check on my bucket list. I've been in Wired magazine. So this was a US one, and this was actually when they started talking about us more and more in Silicon Valley also. Oh, this is cool. Have you heard about this? Parents in Stockholm. That was fun. It was really fun. That was also when I became a parent. So we tried to convey the detail that one of us are not a parent, but it didn't make it for the text. So yeah. So yeah, there were people like, Eric, do you have kids? Like, no, I still don't. Oh well. So yeah, it's a great article. You can still find it online in Wired magazine. It later came out in print for the Wired UK. So of course I went and bought a bunch of those. I have them at home. I mean, who wouldn't? And then we needed to add support for Gothenburg. Because Gothenburg was interested, and we saw that it would be possible. But none of the people who were participating in the project right now were a parent living in Gothenburg with kids in the public school system. And we're like, can we find someone? And I'm like, wait, my brother lives in Gothenburg. So and he's also a developer. And so we, like, could you do this? Took him 2 weeks. That's how good the architecture worked. It's actually like the common denominator for all this public school system is basically the same. So all he had to do was fill in these API hooks that we had, and it worked. Now, Gothenburg was less hostile. They were more like, go ahead, we can't help you, we can't promote you, but we won't stop you. Go ahead. That was fun. So yeah, And then other parents in other cities have tried to do it for other systems, but for technical reasons, some of them are hard, some of them are very hard, and some of them are close to impossible, unfortunately. So we'll see what happens with VIA Class is the one that we're closest to, but it goes slowly because we don't have so many people who are parents there. We've made 23 releases. I think it might be 24 now, actually, of this app. It's about 13,000 lines of Typescript. Typescript basically was a good way to make sure that we didn't end up with bad code. It just translates to JavaScript. 63 contributors. Out of these, maybe 10 are parents living in Stockholm, which is amazing. One of the top 2 contributors, one is in Gothenburg, not my brother, and the other one is Sundsvall. It's amazing. So people really cared. These are old numbers right now, but this was in May where we had 11,000 downloads on App Store, about the same on Play Store. It's a little bit higher now. I think from when school started again this year, we got like a couple of thousand more. There is a natural limit of how many parents will install it, of course. So because there at one time there are like, I think it's like 150,000 parents in the Stockholm school with kids in public school, something like that. That's the most amount of users we could possibly reach. So 10% of those is pretty good for a paid app. Lessons learned. React Native. It's low threshold for all. It's easy for people to get started. Regardless of your background, if you're from C# or Java, etc., it's easy to get started. Even people who had never written code before were actually participating in fixing stuff. Sometimes you need to clean your whole workspace, local workspace, and start from scratch because it's just too many quirks with this toolchain. It works better on iOS than on Android, unfortunately. In Sweden, it's about 50% iOS users and 50% Android users. And the saddest thing here is that the Android users are more of the lower income, and the iOS is more of the higher income. I'm an Android user myself, so of course there are exceptions, but most of them is there, which is why it's so sad that it works worse on Android. Nothing we can do much there. Performance on a React Native app is not great, which also makes it hard for Android because the cheaper devices with low performance will suffer. It works, but it might be slow sometimes from time to time. Another lesson learned from this, and this is not so much about what we learned, but what we want to convey, is that all APIs, regardless of how much you try, it is an open API. If it's public on the internet, even if you protect it in some way, it's going to be an open API. Someone will figure it out. If you annoy your users enough, they will fix things themselves. That we also discovered. And if you really want people to put in an effort, make it about their kids. People will do whatever they can to make it better there. All the code is here, github.com/Skolplattformen. And this is why it's not Skolplattformen is because we had a misspelling in the beginning. We could change that one, but we kind of like it now, so it's fine. But yeah, and we also have a website called skolplattformen.org. We have a bunch of other projects in the group that we are. We have a Discord chat where we talk about stuff. We have started on an app for the students themselves so they can get a better access to their schedule and all the information from the school. And they are writing it themselves with our support. Yeah, so a lot of stuff that's happening, we hope happening, but we're all doing it on our spare time, so there is no time schedule here, basically. So yeah, that's me. Thank you so much for listening. So let's, yeah, thanks. Do we have any questions online before we should start? Nothing? Okay, yeah, so let's see here. Any questions? Everything is crystal clear.
thanks for your talk. I was wondering, because as far as I understood, the school platform in Stockholm, it had a lot of other functionalities as well.
Yes.
With grading and all of these sort of things. So my first question is, how much of that functionality have you lost in your app, or how much have you simplified it? And second, do you have plans to incorporate that functionality? Because there could be it could be problematic that parents or people that are not within the school system decides the apps that teachers should then use as part of their work, and it can have a normative effect on education.
I totally get you. So this app is only for parents. It's not for teachers. It's not for students or pupils. And we can't get access to, like, the grading thing. We can't get access to that. First of all, none of us who are developing this have access to that system, that part of the system. So we can only write stuff for stuff that we can access with the official app. So we can never do more than that one. We can do things better, but not more. With that said, yes, we have got requests from teachers to do the same app for them. And we try to talk to them and say, like, okay, how could we make this work in a safe way? Because that's really, really important for us. We need to do it, like, keeping the integrity of the students and the parents, but also the teachers and stuff like that. And the challenge is there that basically the one who writes this has to be a teacher who has access to the system, so they can write it for their purpose. And then they have to bring in teachers who have access to other parts in order to build those. So that's the only way we can build it for Stockholm school system today, because their API is not officially published how it works. If it would be, we could write the app properly for the teachers as well. But unless we get the documentation for the API, which we have requested, it's still ongoing. We have overruled, or tried to overrule the decision from the city that it's secret. But, you know, yeah, we're still waiting for that one.
Sorry, can I just a clarifying question? So that app for teachers would also only be with menu and schedule and who's in the class, or should there?
No, I would say, like, we could write an app that does everything the teachers can do with the official system. That would be technically possible, but only if we get help from the teachers to write it. Because we can only do the things that you as an individual have access to.
But could you you couldn't do functions that aren't in the original system?
No, we couldn't. Not unless we go into and hack their servers. We can only do we can only do the client side, like what's the user interface, basically. Good question. Any other questions?
I think it's interesting. I want to know who built the original platform, obviously. But when you see the 1 billion prize on the original platform, what do you think about that?
Well, let's start with who built it. I won't name them by name, but it's a big consultant company that won the thing, and you can just read about them. And it's a merger between a Swedish and a Finnish one. Oh wait, Norwegian, right? Yeah, anyway, it's Norwegian and Finnish one, I think. Anyway, exactly who wrote it, we don't know. We have people who have contacted us claiming they work there and telling us some internal news, but we can't verify that. So we don't know much about exactly who wrote it. But looking at the bills and everything, it's unlikely to be outsourced Indian workforce or anything like that. The price is too high per hour. The 1 billion, I would say, give me half the money and I will do everything myself. No, it's one of these, like, insane amount of money. This was only up until 2020. It's been more money since then, especially trying to block us, as you saw. It's a level of not understanding how to build system, both from the customer, like the Stockholm City, but also from apparently the people there in that organization that built this. And I would like to raise the fact that that is the organization we should look at, point finger at. It's not the Stockholm City School. It's like, well, if you build a house, sure, you should read up on stuff, but you cannot be the expert in electricity, plumbing, construction. That's not your job. So the building a bad, if someone comes and build a bad house, you have insurances for that one and covered. They actually have insurances for not having the system they ordered delivered, but they never cashed in on that. I would like to have the focus pointed at these big consultant companies that just let us down. So, yeah.
Another question. I don't live in Stockholm, so what does this platform actually do? Not your platform, but the original platform. What's it supposed to do? Is it some sort of like knowing what your children ate in school and what they had, or I don't know, the subjects during that day? Or
Yeah. So it's as I understand, it's also not just a single system. It's actually like a bunch of third-party systems that are used by other schools and other cities. And then it's all boiled down together with like information that gets pushed out from the teachers to the parents and then provided in the same funnel out in there. And this, the parts they do, what it does is, from the teacher side, it's rating, the grades, basically. Sending out newsletters to the parents that tomorrow is the kids who bring this to school or pack outdoor clothing or stuff like that. Planning, I guess, is involved. I really have no clue on the details. But anyone working in a public school in other cities probably know what kind of system they use, and the Stockholm School Platform is supposed to replace that. What I do know is that a lot of teachers in Stockholm use their private Google account and do planning in the Google Sheets, and sometimes even just email from their private Gmail to the parents. So, because it just doesn't work. Yeah. More questions? Yeah.
Do the teachers need to create an account on the app in order for the school to acquire it? Or like
You mean our app or
your app? What does it require from the school?
nothing? It doesn't affect what the teachers have to do. The teachers use their existing current bad system to publish information, and we just fetch it from there. So if they publish it wrong or they use it wrong or it doesn't work for them, then it doesn't show up in our app either. So it's just an interface for the parents.
All right. So in your view, what knowledge would Stockholm Stad needed to have to make a better procurement or building the system better? What you mentioned this the Vasa chef, and what should be learned from these systems, or would they be incapable of solving this?
Yeah, so there are many. That's a good question. There are many ideas of how would we build stuff in a better way, and my suggestion for building it in a better way is basically hire someone who is like independent from the whole thing, not dependent on the company delivering it, not independent from the Stockholm school, and not involved in the teaching at all, who does the reviewing. Sort of like when you build your house, you hire an external person to come and check everything. That's the kind of role we need. You need an external expert person who comes in regularly and checks that everything is moving according to plan, especially when it comes to these big public school systems or public systems that are being built. Doesn't matter if it's a Stockholm School Platform, if it's a new hospital system or the communication system that the Swedish police was building. It's the same history repeating there, and it's like it's kept really independent people reviewing stuff. That's the solution.
We have a question from our online audience. What do you think the reason is for the efficiency of Stockholm Stad?
Efficiency or inefficiency?
Inefficiency.
Yeah. I think it's sort of like something when you start. If you stay at a place for long enough and you get into like a position where you get the power to build something, you will build a pyramid. This is my pyramid. I built this pyramid. Everybody wants to build a pyramid eventually if they reach it high enough in the organization. And I think this is another sign of this one. They really wanted to build the best school system. They really wanted to be part of this, and they really couldn't see themselves failing. So they kept building this pyramid even if it was falling apart all the time. Remove your ego from the equation is a solution to that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
And now it's time for pizza.
Cool.
No, only for people on site, not online. Sorry.
Oh, they can order a pizza.
They could, yeah.